All right. Welcome to another edition of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. I am your host, Chris Hinkle. I am a retired FBI supervisory special agent. I spent over 20 years in the FBI, 5 years with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, 13 years total in the Air Force. So about 33 years of government experience when I retired. Sorry we haven't been actually active on the stream here recently. We've had a lot of things going on, not just in current events, but just in my personal life. So a week ago Tuesday, we welcomed Sutton Grace Hinkle into the world. Sutton is the daughter of my oldest son, Jake. It's Christopher Jacob, and Sarah Grace, and she is amazing. Big baby. Sarah Grace is a little girl, so unfortunately we had to go through C-section, which, surgery is always scary, but everything went smooth. Sutton was 21 inches long, so maybe we're getting some height, more height than to the Hinkle family, and she was 9 pounds 7 ounces. She did she barely wore newborn diapers in the hospital. It was amazing that and I feel bad for Jake and Sarah Grace because they were stocked up on all these newborn diapers and now they can't do anything with them because they're already opened up. There's got to be a way to donate them somewhere. We'll figure that out. We've had some tragic events since I last spoke with you, and that was the murder of Charlie Kirk. I didn't get a chance to really comment on that on this platform. Uh, I did a bunch of hits, as well as a couple of other retired FBI agents that are in my close circle on this event, some radio and television and some print media. And it's it's a tragic event. I was in an X Spaces at the time, listening in to some people that that seem to be in the know and are good at analyzing things when somebody popped in and said that Kirk had been shot. And it wasn't long after that, like within minutes, that a video was posted and I was able to see what happened. And I immediately shared that with Kash Patel's team. I don't know if I was the first one to share it with him, but the person I shared it with didn't know about it yet, and it was it was just horrific to see. Uh, I have, unfortunately, in my career in law enforcement, primarily with the OSI, investigated a lot of what we called suspicious death cases. We always looked at every death, whether it was suicide or a homicide, as a straight up murder. We started from there and worked our way out. And when I saw the shot, and I keep hearing people talk about this magic bullet and this Superman syndrome with him, it was pretty clear there was some exit from the body because of the explosion that came from the side of his neck, where his carotid artery is here on the left side. That artery right there, you lose consciousness almost immediately with something like that severed, and it's likely within seconds that that you're gone. People can be revived after pressure on that. It is one of the techniques that we were taught at the FBI Academy. We didn't call it chokehold because you're not actually choking anybody. It's just a way of using portions of your arm with a hold from the rear to put pressure on the carotid artery. And in about 7 seconds, that person goes unconscious. And it was terrible to see. My heart goes out for his wife and his kids, and I pray for them that they take comfort in knowing that Charlie is with his Savior right now. I believe it was instantaneous that he was taken home, and that brings me some comfort. And as I tell people, and I said this when my mom passed away in 2022, you really want to celebrate their life. You do feel an immediate sense of loss, but then you have to take comfort in the fact that you're going to see them again one day. And that's what you work toward. And you want to make sure as many people as possible are able to make that trip as well. So if there's anybody out there, if you are unsure about your salvation, feel free to DM me. I will pray with you. I don't care whether we're on opposite sides of the fence politically. Uh, I it's important to me that your eternity is guaranteed. So we want to get into some things here about primarily some things popping up in the current events involving the FBI. We are going to get to the Jim Comey uh, indictment, and I'll give you my thoughts on that. And I want to talk real quick, just to kind of put a bow on it. I've done some radio and television, did some radio last week on Thursday. So if anybody had the opportunity to tune in, if not, it's pinned to my profile. You can go back and watch the stream where I got to sit in for my good friend Andrew Gasser. Andrew is one of the hosts at WYEB over here in Flora, Mississippi. And from time to time, the host over there will reach out to me and ask me if I can sit in. And I always try to accommodate. They were one of the first people to have me on any type of media, whether it would be radio or television. Another person that I try to make sure I accommodate on the television space is who's become a good friend of mine. That's Chris Salcedo over at Newsmax. He was one of the first people to actually have me on television. And we're trying to improve over that, back from my old webcam that was on there. And we're going to upgrade this webcam as well as we move forward with this podcast. And then there's people that are in the media that I actually have built some trust with. And one of those individuals, let me find it here. If Mr. Producer, if you'll go to my share screen, one of the individuals here is Andrew. Excuse me, is Daniel Rosen. I don't know why I'm saying Andrew. Is Daniel Rosen. And Daniel writes for the New York Sun, and he reached out to me after the indictment. I'm usually pretty candid with him. I could have been more candid in the comments that I gave him, but myself and one of the other retired FBI agents, Jim Kallstrom, that I have great respect for, one of the legacy type guys from the FBI. It wasn't necessarily that we were cheering it. I just thought it was kind of ironic because we all remember, and I think it was back in 2018, Jim Comey, you can come back to me, Mr. Producer. Jim Comey did an interview on CNN, and they were asking him about his decision to send a couple of agents over to the White House early in their administration to talk with General Flynn. Now, I've had my questions that I'd like answered by General Flynn. I doubt very seriously he's going to reach out to me, but my concern is that a couple of FBI agents just show up at the White House and they seem to be welcomed in by General Flynn. And a couple of things can seem to be issues there. Number one, either General Flynn was naive and didn't think it was unusual that a couple of FBI agents just show up and want to talk, or General Flynn wasn't naive, but he had some arrogance about him that he felt, based on his background and experience, that he can handle himself in that situation. Or he didn't take the time to clear that with upper echelons of White House staff at the time, as everything was in disarray while people were moving into the White House and the West Wing. None of those things are good. As I tell people, and my brother-in-law who produces this show, Chris Allen, is an attorney, will tell you it's never a good idea to talk to the cops. I tell people, and I've given demonstrations and I've conducted lectures on this and training seminars about conducting interviews and interrogations. I tell people there's nothing up my sleeve. When I come in to talk to you, it's just a very casual conversation, and we will make sure legally every base is touched as far as your constitutional rights. There are times where I don't have to provide you your Miranda rights. That's, if you're not in custody, I don't have to. You don't have to talk to me, but I usually make that clear. And over my 25 years in federal law enforcement, and this is not hyperbole, I can only recall maybe two maybe three people that invoked their rights. And I think the two of those people were Air Force individuals that we'd brought in when I was an OSI agent. And that's because they make you actually fill out a form. And whether they're in custody or not, they want that form initialed. And when people see an official document in front of them, they start getting a little nervous. Uh, my job is to just get the information. So I've conducted a number of interviews and interrogations where I did not rights advise, but I did make them aware of what rights they still possess, that they don't have to talk to me, they can walk away. But it's an opportunity for them to hear my side of the story that I got from other people and their side of the story. I typically, in those interviews and interrogations, will explain to the individual, I've collected a lot of evidence. I've talked to a lot of people. I've read a lot of documents. I have everybody else's side of the story. This is your opportunity to give me your side of the story. And you can choose not to do that. Any good defense attorney is going to tell you not to talk to me. But if you don't talk to me today, the next time you might be able to talk about any of this is going to be in court. Now, your attorney is going to want you to do that because they have a lot more control over what is said and what is not said. But it's I'm just willing to tell you exactly what we got and see if you want to provide any commentary or clarification on it. And most people want to hear what it is. I'm a big fan of, hey, I'll sit here and you can talk all day. It doesn't mean I'm going to answer anything, and I'll just listen. Now, what you can risk doing is reacting to something that is being said. I'm not a big fan of the kinesiology in interviews and interrogations. There's some people that just have general tics that they engage in that are not indicative of deception, but that's for another day. So let's cover some of these things that are in the media right now. We'll start off with Jim Comey and his indictment. He was indicted, and I've got a copy of the indictment right here. He was indicted on 2 counts. 18 USC 1001, which is the notorious lying to a federal official. And most often that's used with an FBI agent. I don't think in my 25 years, I don't know anybody in my circle that solely an individual was convicted on 18 USC 1001 for lying. I don't. It's kind of an additional charge. It's a place marker type charge. Usually there's something else, the substance of what you're lying about can have its tentacles into illegal activity. And the other is 18 USC 1505 for obstruction, which that means knowingly not providing information can be a crime as well. And I think that's where Comey's going to get hung up, because there's going to be people around him that can comment about dates, times, and locations and conversations that they had with him, whether or not he's giving directions to specifically do something. That he's going to have a problem with that, because people, when you have 4 or 5 people that say, I was in the room, this was briefed to him, and he knew about this, and then you contrast that with his testimony before Congress, where he says, I don't recall, or I'm unaware. I actually did a Grok search, and you can do this as well. Ask Grok, ask Chat GPT. Now go back and verify it. I always take those things with a grain of salt, because it's a collection of what other people are saying and different resources. And too often Grok will pull from resources that I don't trust. But I said, just take a look at Jim Comey's time before Congress, the House and the Senate, and his testimony, and how many times he said, I don't know, or I don't recall. And I think I got a return of, it looked through all of the transcripts of every time he testified, the ones that were available. And it ended up being about 275. Now, my brother-in-law and I were having a conversation before he came on the air here about that number of 275. And it seems like that's about the number of agents that were seen, or what we're hearing in news reports, that they were embedded at the Capitol on January 6th. And I'm going to touch on that as well. But getting back to the Comey indictment, I think he should be nervous. The juries in the Eastern District of Virginia, where I believe he's charged. Let me double check here. Uh, it would appear United States District Attorney, Eastern District of Virginia. I did a lot of work when I was in Washington field office with EDVA, as we refer to it, and with the District of Columbia. And I usually split time between the two of those with some of the cases that I worked, some of the online undercover things that we were doing back then. It the juries in EDVA tend to lean a bit left, so it's very telling that they were able to brief what they did before this grand jury, and you had probably a left-leaning grand jury say there's reason to believe that he's committed a crime and you need to move forward. I will be interested in seeing if his mugshot is posted. I'm not a big fan of perp walks, as we call them, where you see someone in handcuffs being escorted in and escorted out. It's going to seem like he's being given some special treatment because he's, brought in after hours, or, behind the scenes, or back door, or something like that. It's actually FBI policy. We're not supposed to be doing perp walks. They can be prejudicial to the person that's under investigation or being charged. I'm not a big fan of those. I think I think anybody saying that he's getting special treatment because of that probably doesn't work much in federal law enforcement, especially in the FBI, because I would say a large number of the cases that I work where we had charges, arrest warrants for individuals, the cases that I had, they just met us down at the courthouse. You contact their attorney if they already have one, and you say, hey, you're going to be arrested. Let's do this the safest, easiest way possible. Let's not bring any unnecessary attention to it. And why don't you just meet me down at the courthouse? Now, if you don't meet down at the courthouse, they have to understand that they're going to be brought there. There is an order from the court. You are directed to go get this individual and bring them before the court. So that is going to happen. I think he will just be brought in. He will be processed. As far as the release of the mugshot, I'm on both sides of the fence of that. I don't really have a problem. I don't think that's prejudicial. It's an action that's taken place. I think having the picture out there can benefit you. It can also be a detractor. It definitely benefited Donald Trump. I mean, he was putting that thing on T-shirts. So it can work out in your favor. But Comey, as I said in I'm quoted in the article by Daniel Rosen, I met him, had distinct conversations with him probably about 5 times. 2 of those were just standing in line to get a sandwich at the headquarters cafeteria up on the 8th floor. It was unusual to see a director of the FBI getting a sandwich. I don't remember Louis Freeh ever doing that. Definitely not Robert Mueller. Never bumped into Chris Wray in the cafeteria. They usually send somebody to go get food for them, or they bring their meals in. But I had those 2 conversations with him. He visited our field office in Jackson, Mississippi twice. One of those, when he came down, I think it was the second time that he came down, I was actually out on a hostage rescue. I mean, not hostage rescue. Sorry, a hostage negotiator call out in West Mississippi. An individual was out in the woods and threatening to kill himself. And we went out there to talk to him, and we ended up getting him into custody before he hurt himself or anybody else. The locals were able to get up on him and kind of knock him out. I think they hit him with a beanbag or something like that. But we really didn't want to see anything bad happen to him, so it was a good outcome. But that was one of the visits that he had. And then the 5th time that I met him, I think it was Dallas, Texas, and I was there for a conference as a DSAC coordinator, domestic Security Advisory Council. It's where you kind of work with the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, and you kind of educate them on the FBI's role and mission. You work with their security officers. They actually, and they may still have this, they were actually going through the process of getting classified clearances to some of these security officers so they could be briefed without having to go through non-disclosure agreements and other paperwork, briefed on matters that would be relevant to the protection of the infrastructure that they're over, whether it's airlines or power companies, things like that. So he was there, and this was right after his famous January 5th, 2016 speech, where he exonerated Hillary Clinton. First talked about how she was involved in all this illegal activity and anybody else would be charged, but he didn't think a grand jury would actually return a verdict. Well, he's finding out that a grand jury can return a verdict right now. But he actually made a joke about Hillary Clinton. We were briefed before we went into the meeting with him. It was myself and about 30 other people that were in these DSAC positions, that we were sitting in an auditorium, and Comey came up to speak, and we were told beforehand, don't talk about the Hillary Clinton thing. Don't, ask something stupid. Don't try to showboat. Let's just have a conversation with the director of the FBI. Well, I look forward to having candid conversations with FBI directors. I've had candid conversations with Robert Mueller. I've had candid conversations with Louis Freeh. I've had candid conversations with Chris Wray. So I just kind of sat quietly, and he came up onto the stage to speak. And then he opened up the floor to questions, and it was a lot of silence. Finally, somebody spoke up, and they were asking about what books he reads, and a lot of us just kind of rolled our eyes. And then he kind of jokingly laughed he said, nobody wants to ask me about Hillary Clinton's emails, and then made a joke about it. And that kind of solidified the feeling that I had from the very first time that I met him. He wasn't meant for this role. He wasn't cut out to be in charge of the FBI. He was just a creepy individual to be around. I tell people, I have a background in education and psychology. That's what my degree's in. And I tell people, when you get that nervous feeling in your stomach or the hair standing up on the back of your neck, there is a substantive reason for it. You may not be able to articulate it, but that's the kind of feeling I got around him. He just was a creepy individual. He tried to seem too polished and rehearsed in the speeches that he gave. The two times that he visited the Jackson Division, he gave exactly the same speech, without notes, without prompter, without any of that. That is a bit unusual, because it didn't feel like it was something from the heart. And I didn't care for him from day one. So it's unsurprising that he was indicted for trying to obfuscate the truth. You're going to find that if you're in that position as the FBI director, you're briefed on a lot of things, and something as significant as Crossfire Hurricane or any of the other FISAs that he signed off on, which I think that if he's going to be gotten, if he's going to do jail time, if he's actually going to be convicted, it's probably going to be signing off on those FISAs. Because we already know that Kevin Kleinsmith, who was with the FBI, falsified information that was in the affidavit for the FISA warrant against Carter Page, was found guilty of that. I think he got 6 months probation and lost his law license, and he's probably got that back now. But he's going to find that saying that I don't know about this when you have other people that brief you on it, it doesn't work out well. And I'm glad to see somebody being held accountable for it. On a political note, I want you to understand this, because we're getting ready to go into 2026. You're going to have these representatives cloaking themselves in all of this success, cloaking themselves into, hey, Jim Comey's finally getting his comeuppance. There's a problem with that. He did all these things while they were sitting in those seats before those committees, and we didn't see any charges come from it. We may have seen a referral, but we didn't see anything really come of it. It was a lot of showboating. It was a lot of theater. And you need to question your representatives about, why didn't you do something about this in real time when it was going on? You are our representative. These are things that we as citizens would ask. What about this? What about that? And you have the tools necessary to effect some change. You can hold up their money, withhold their funding. That will definitely get their attention. I can tell you, when they hear that phrase, withhold the money, are you willing to withhold the money? They get nervous about it, because it affects their donors. It affects other individuals in Congress that they partner up with. Some of them, it affects their bottom line based on their stock trades. We're seeing some issues with that. And I can tell you firsthand, when I asked my congressman that question, before about 200 and something people. I got screamed at by a party leader down here in Mississippi because I was asking, why wouldn't you just do this to get that change? They didn't want to hear his answer on that. They didn't want him to say anything because the state parties are about money as well. So about let's go through some of these other things here that I've got on the screen. Let me pull these up. Uh, here's another thing that's in the media, Mr. Producer. If you go to my share, this guy Publius put up here many DOJ and FBI officials threatening to resign to protest the indictment of James Comey. That is 100% hogwash. That is somebody seeking clicks. I would be surprised if many, define many. What are you talking about? 3? Are you talking about 100? We saw this, and you can come back to me. We saw this. Uh, we saw this when Kash Patel was, brought in as director. And the FBI was directed to start working with ICE on immigration enforcement. There's going to be blue flu. These people are going to walk out. You had idiots like what's that guy's name? Kyle Seraphin, who's out there. Please don't go look him up. The guy's a charlatan. He barely had a cup of coffee on the FBI. He is not a subject matter expert on anything. He is definitely not a whistleblower, and he was justly terminated from the FBI for unprofessional conduct. If you peruse his timeline, and I don't suggest you do, you're going to see that typically when somebody challenges him on something, he just responds with some type of picture. Often it is a sexual innuendo picture. I've had my name attached to one of those. So, not even getting into substance on there. I would gladly debate him in a fair, moderated debate. I think he and I talking one-on-one would be like trying to nail Jello to the wall. The guy's just an idiot. That's my professional opinion. But anyway, he and others around him were saying that, our sources inside the FBI are telling us that agents are going to walk out. Guess what? There wasn't any mass walkouts. Guess what? There wasn't any mass firings. There have been some people that have been fired, some of them justly, some of them unjustly. I honestly believe, after reading the affidavit from Brian Driscoll, Stephen Jensen, and Spencer Evans, that they were unjustly terminated. And I call balls and strikes. I've made those comments to people around Kash Patel. I think they were unjustly terminated, reading through it. The process wasn't followed. The things that they were being directed to do, according to their affidavit, were borderline illegal. You just can't do that. I think that they will be successful in court. I know one of those individuals. I do know Stephen Jensen. I'm not friends with him, but I did work alongside him for about 2 years when he was Assistant Special Agent in Charge down here in Jackson, Mississippi, right before I retired, and just a good, decent guy. I have no reason to doubt what he puts in the affidavit. You can search around and find a copy of that affidavit. If I get a chance, I'll try to post a link to it. But there are some individuals out there that are justly fired. And that brings us to let me find the article here. All right. So you can pull it back up on the screen. It's an article that was written by my good friend Jim Galliano. I call him Gags, and or people call him Jimmy. And you can go find this article here. He writes from time to time for the New York Post. And here's the pictures of the kneelers. So I do know some people involved in that time that this was going on out of the FBI Washington field office, that they were probably given some bad advice or bad direction from the then special agent in charge. Not going to mention that person's name. I do know who it is. I have had interactions with that individual throughout my career. I'm not going to make a comment one way or another, but I think it was a bad decision to do this. It may have been that they were being told to de-escalate. As you can see, some of them are proud to do it. You've got to maintain your professionalism as an FBI agent. Looking at these pictures, you can tell that is not a professional look. Not a big fan of the clothing attire that they have on. Definitely not a big fan of the apparent lack of fitness of these individuals. But there is a thing that I would caution people on that are celebrating the termination of these kneelers is it may not turn out in the end the way that you hope. Do I think that they are unfit to be FBI agents? I think they made poor decisions here. It definitely shows a lack of maturity. It shows that they were individuals that probably during my time of coming into the FBI in the 90s would not have been welcomed into the FBI. But what I do want to say is this is like 8 or 10 people inside Washington field office. There's 700 or 800 agents that are in there. These individuals are not indicative of the others inside the office. There's likely some more tenured, long in the tooth agents there. I would have been one of these. If the special agent in charge said, I want you to go out there and take a knee, I would absolutely say, I'm not doing that. You can put me somewhere else. You can punish me for insubordination, whatever you're going to do. You're not going to fire me for refusing to do it. You do that, I've got veterans preference in my FBI career, and there's certain additional immediate appeals that happen with someone who's a 5-point vets preference person. But my guess is that there are a number of agents behind the scenes that just ignored the call to go out there, ignored, going out there and standing. I don't see any SWAT individuals taking these out there. I'd be shocked if that had happened. But I do think that they definitely should have been encouraged to move on if they're going to make some type of social process like this. Gags wrote a great scathing article on this. It was during a time that we were having some problems and open problems with the FBI Agents Association, who Gags looked into, and it appeared that these individuals were rewarded with some type of gift cards, which I think was ridiculous. But that's a problem we've had with the FBI Agents Association for quite a while. And you can come back to me, Mr. Producer. I'm well documented out there in my problems with the FBI Agents Association. I wrote an article, the day one agenda for the FBI director, back in December, I think is when it was published. In one of those, I said that there should be no active duty agents in leadership roles at the FBI Agents Association. The FBI Agents Association is a nonprofit, and that nonprofit represents current and retired agents. And the taxpayers should not be subsidizing with time and resources of having onboard FBI agents spend a percentage of their time in leadership positions. And I've gone toe to toe in some debates with past agent association presidents. Tom O'Connor is one of those. Tom and I were, his wife Jean and I were first office agents at Washington field office. Got along with him well there. Spent a lot of time with him on 9/11. He was on the National Capital Response Team, saw him, here and there. He was also on the evidence response team. So, and we bumped into each other throughout our careers. I think the last time I bumped into him was in Baghdad, Iraq, when he brought a team in to do some evidence response team training. Tom was not well thought of by other agents. He, never really worked a case, but took a lot of credit for cases. And that's just comments I'm getting from other people. I can provide the receipts if that need be. But Tom and I have argued back and forth. Tom was a big, what we call, Comeyist. He was a defender of Jim Comey. And I did a quick search. Tom has blocked me on LinkedIn after we had a debate on the Constitution, after he and this guy, Chuck Rosenberg, wrote an article wanting to usurp your constitutional rights by applying the same types of investigative utilities that we use on the counterintelligence side against foreign nationals. They wanted to apply those to citizens because they wanted to be able to use those tools to expedite things in their opinion. And I thought it was ridiculous. It's definitely undermines the Constitution. I'd said so. He got upset. I really got upset when media outlets were reaching out to me for comment after seeing our online debate. And he's popped up a couple of times here and there through his wife's account to check me out, which I think is hilarious. But so these individuals that were terminated on the kneeling, if that's solely why they were terminated, I'm going to disappoint you. And if you go out and search for FX Reagan on X, he's a retired special agent in charge, very balls and strikes type guy, blunt, conservative. I know who he is. I'm not, FX Reagan is not his name, but unless he gives me the approval to tell you who he actually is, he is an author now, but he does make some comments. He's in one of the DM groups that I'm in, and he has a good analysis about these individuals that were terminated and how, if that's solely what it was, based on the amount of time since then, 5 years, it's likely that they might get their jobs back or get some money. Now, my guess is if they were willing to do this type of thing of taking this kneel out in front to make a political statement, they likely were involved in some other activities or likely poor performers. We've got some of these people out there that call themselves whistleblowers from the FBI. And when you start digging into, well, why were you suspended from the FBI? Or why were you terminated? And then you find out that it wasn't for whistleblowing. It was actually poor performance or bad decisions. And, you know, whether or not those individuals get reinstated, that's not my fight. I don't think people that denigrate the majority of the agents there, as I mentioned before, those 8 or 10 are not indicative of the 800 agents inside the Washington field office at that time. And I hope that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino will articulate that to citizens, that these individuals are not indicative of the rank and file agents. They made some disparaging comments before they became director and deputy director. I hope they reconcile that now that they've met and worked with these individuals. Those same individuals that everybody's castigating, they're the ones out there doing the legwork and these law enforcement support in the Charlie Kirk murder. They're the ones that are actually out there on the ground protecting you from things that you don't even know about, and they don't seek any accolades for it. So, I still stand by it. Even in my 20 plus years in the FBI, I think I met 2, maybe 3 individuals that I would consider lean left or lean hard left. Tom O'Connor would be one of those. And I'm just, I'm not disparaging him or acting defamatory about him. I'll provide chapter and verse of how he did things that I think stepped outside his responsibilities as an FBI agent, and especially as president of the Agents Association. I'm hoping the Agents Association is getting back on track. I still stand by that we need to know active duty agents are in those positions. The taxpayers need to get their money's worth, and they don't get their money's worth by championing and holding leadership positions in a nonprofit. So we've got the Comey indictment here. I do think that there will be some more charges that will come down. I like to wait on other shoes to drop. I think that you may see some individuals that the FBI is likely talking to or working through their attorneys that are going to provide information that's going to be a problem for him. So we've talked about the firing of the kneelers and the Agents Association. One thing that my brother-in-law reminded me, I didn't talk much about the Epstein stuff. So the problem that people like Thomas Massie have with the Epstein files, and it has become increasingly apparent. I didn't care for his dad, and I don't think that they're conservatives. I'm not a libertarian. Hardcore libertarians, are really laissez-faire with their politics, and just want to hands off on everything, and that always troubled me. I do think that they have some good ideas, but this thing that Thomas Massie has engaged in with just release the names. I know who the names are. There's high prominent officials. Okay. If you're so brave and you think that those individuals have committed crimes, you tell us the names. Be able to back it up. You better hope that you're right, because you're going to open yourself up to scrutiny and possible lawsuit if you put a name out there of an individual who did nothing wrong, but just because they happen to have been loosely associated with Jeffrey Epstein, and now you're usurping their due process rights. It's a problem. For somebody that purports to know about the Constitution, I'll debate Thomas Massie any day, twice on Sundays, about the Constitution. The guy's a charlatan. And I say that, and I can provide the receipts for that. He's drawing attention to himself, and it's interesting that he had to caucus with the Democrats to try to get his legislation through. that kind of tells you who he is. Um, I don't give him any credence. I try not to comment on him anymore. It's just ridiculous that he's wanting to do something like that. But that would be my question. And I'm surprised that some in the media or some other conservatives don't just directly confront him. There's a reason that he goes on CNN and MSNBC. It's because those are friendly networks to him. I want to see him go and sit in front of Greg Gutfeld. I want to see him go and sit in front of, Jesse Waters, or I want to see him answer to Clay, Travis, and Buck Sexton. You know, you need somebody that's going to ask the hard questions of him. It's similar to the hard questions that got asked of guys like Lindsey Graham, and why there's only certain shows that he'll appear on right now. The guy's a charlatan as well. He is definitely not a conservative. I don't think I could have. There's not enough evidence to convict him of being a conservative. Same thing with Massey. So on the Epstein thing, we've got the video that, I guess there was an extra minute or something that was discovered. One thing that I have noticed is that when people try to analyze and look at videos of crime scenes, nothing beats being there in person. My brother-in-law and I have had this conversation too. You can look at something from photographs and video, and when you get on scene, it looks different. So whether or not somebody got into, to kill Epstein, I don't think that's the case. I looked at photographs from the crime scene, not just the video. And the questions I came away with were, what were in the medicine bottles that were in his cell? What was that for? They were prescription bottles, or looked like prescription bottles. What was he taking? Was he on some type of SSRI that if you immediately take him off, then his, whatever psychological issues he was going through can magnify. And I think from the Ghislaine Maxwell interview, he had some issues, psychological issues that he was going through and seeking counseling and likely some type of medication for. Now, as far as whether or not he was hung, I get people throwing these things out. Oh, it was paper clothing, paper sheets, blah, 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 all of that. There were, it looks like, attempts for other ligatures were in the cell from the photographs. And ultimately, there was a ligature that was put around his neck, and it put the pressure on that carotid artery and killed him. It doesn't take long. You don't need to full body hang. I have investigated crime scenes where people hung from doorknobs. They just put the ligature around their neck, hook it to a doorknob, and kind of scooch their butt down until they get sufficient pressure on the carotid artery. They pass out, and then they die. That was one of the last cases I worked before I left from my post over in Rapid City, South Dakota at Ellsworth Air Force Base as an OSI agent. We had a guy that was a tech sergeant with the security forces that hanged himself that way. So I do think that based on all available information that I see, and I don't have access to the actual case file like Dan Bongino or Kash Patel did. It looks to me like the Epstein hung himself. He committed suicide. Now, there could be malfeasance involved in that, like negligence of not checking on him while he had just recently been on suicide watch or was still on suicide watch. But do I think somebody went into the cell, thrashed around with him, choked him out, and then left, and did that in under a minute? It's just highly unlikely. So that's really all I'm going to comment on the Epstein stuff, other than be careful about putting the names out there of individuals. You're wanting to release these lists and things. You got to be really careful about that, because if you release the name of an individual that had nothing to do with it and is innocent, you can find yourself in some hot water. Let's talk a little bit more about, before we get to the final one, which is the 270 something agents. But I want to touch briefly on Jimmy Kimmel and where he was taken off the air. That is not a First Amendment issue. The amendments to the Constitution, especially the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, they provide restrictions on government. They don't provide restrictions on what your employer can do. Now, there are things that are passed into law based on your constitutional rights to help protect you in the workplace. Americans with Disability Act, things like that. You can't discriminate based on age in hiring. Those types of things, you're not looking at a violation of civil rights, you're looking at a violation of the law. When it comes to government, infringing upon your rights and trying to suppress your speech, that's a different story. I'll give you an example. Remember when Joe Biden sent individuals, the FBI sent individuals over to Facebook and places to say, we don't want this story run, we don't want that run. And they were, providing direct guidance to Facebook and for Zuckerberg and his underlings to take specific actions or not take specific actions. You become an agent of the government by doing that. And you can find yourself in some hot water by following the advice or the direction of the government in doing that. That can get you in a violation of 18 USC 242, violation of deprivation of rights under color of law. So and I actually brought this up to our school board here when the Merrick Garland memo went out. You can go search my name on that. I dissected that thing. You can look for my last name, Hinkle, and then the words DOJ nor FBI. If you just do that, you'll find the article. I broke down every facet of Garland's memo, the sites of the things that he used to justify the actions that he wanted taken. And I briefed that before our school board after I wrote the article. And I reminded them, if the FBI comes over here and they direct you to do something, they train you to do something, you become an agent of the government and you are susceptible to violation of law and the Constitution. So tread lightly. And a couple of those people on school board are attorneys and were nodding and, yep, that's right. I also went the extra step of actually contacting the civil rights supervisor of the local FBI office. And I cautioned him. I said, let me tell you, if I see FBI agents or task force members at these school boards monitoring activities, I'm going to highlight it and I am going to contact Congress. I'm going to contact DOJ. I'm going to highlight this because you are just the mere presence can put a chilling effect on exercise of your First Amendment rights to petition and seek redress of grievances. And, you have to be very careful with that. I know this from experience. I'm not like these idiots out there, these whistleblowers that had, a cup of coffee in the FBI. I actually supervised, managed, led the FBI civil rights program in Mississippi, kind of the birthplace of civil rights here. We had some successes. And during my tenure of managing that program, we were ranked the number one, the top out of all 56 field offices. Our civil rights program was the top according to the metrics and meeting all the criteria of dotting I's, crossing T's, and successfully adjudicating cases. So I kind of know what I'm talking about, and I'm willing to discuss that with anybody. You want to call me up if you're an attorney. You want to call me up if you're a college professor that teaches about the Constitution. We can debate this back and forth about constitutional rights. Jimmy Kimmel, it was a decision based on the free marketplace. And your employer can make the decision that the statements that you're making don't reflect the views of the organization, and based on their contract they may have with you, or their hiring practices, or their personnel policies, they can terminate you. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not a free speech issue. You don't get the right to go in and use your platform as an employee from somebody else to make your statements. It's a reason you don't hear a lot of FBI agents out there, on board speaking out. If they do, they're going to get called into the office. There's Hatch Act violations. There's, policy violations. There's all kinds of things. They typically don't speak. And for anybody out there that keeps quoting, I've got FBI sources on the inside that are telling me this. I don't care if you are a well-known, large follower podcaster, if you're a writer for a media outlet, or if you're these wannabe, used to be's, never was FBI agents talking about they've got sources inside the FBI that are saying this and saying that. My question is, you're either lying or somebody's leaking. And if they're leaking, I hope that the FBI is looking into it. You don't talk. You just don't. It undermines people's due process rights if you are making comments about things going in to undermine the mission of protecting the civil liberties of citizens, and you're leaking that information without it going through proper channels. That's another thing that Jim Comey is going to find a problem with because of selected leaks. Now, the FBI director has the ability to go out, stand before a microphone and make statements. They're given that authority, but the underlings are not. They can be directed to, they can be given information that they say push out there. And you definitely can't obfuscate yourself by having a friend in the media like, well, I didn't say this in the media that, and it turns out to be a friend of yours. I, I, I think if the FBI goes through and they dot all the I's and cross the T's, Jim Comey's going to have a bad day. I mean, Jim Comey's going to have a bad day in court. At a minimum, we're going to see some sunlight on the things that happen. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about before I close it out are the 275 or so agents that were allegedly embedded, I think is the word that I've seen used out there on January 6th. Would it be unusual for 275 agents to be out there among the crowd? No, it would not. Agents are allowed to exercise their First Amendment rights to petition and seek redress like anyone else. They're not allowed to do that from the standpoint of the FBI. You can't speak out saying that, you can't make it appear that this is the position of the FBI. And you can't do it where it's, undermines anything. But, going out and walking around and, attending a rally and public speeches, political events, you can do that. So the fact that there's 275, you got to remember, there's well over 1,000 agents just inside FBI headquarters, maybe another 700 or 800 in Washington Field, another several hundred in the Baltimore field office. That surrounding area. You can even go up as far as Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia. The number of agents there that could have come to that area. So 275 is not a lot to have been walking around out there. And they said they were in plain clothes. Pretty much all FBI agents are in plain clothes. Suits are plain clothes. It's not a uniform. It's not like you're in the military or anything. And I've told you, the uniform of the FBI agent is plain clothes suits. That's what we really need to get back to. And I've called out Kash Patel for his reluctance in the beginning not to wear a suit. I like to see him more in a suit. Don't wear the SWAT raid jackets and stuff. Get out, speak from behind a podium. I'm not a big fan of doing the podcast. The tweeting needs to slow down. If you got something important to say, let's say it in a professional and important environment. People are going to respect you more for it. You may garner some likes from some Gen Zs or Gen Xers or something like that, but that doesn't equate to getting the respect back. The respect is to act in a respectful and professional manner. So I will constantly beat that drum of, you or Pam Bondi or anybody's got something important to say it behind a podium. So out of the 275 agents, the report, I did read the IG report. There was about 24 to 26 confidential human sources that were reported to be there. After reading through the report, there was one confidential human source I would have had some questions about. I don't think that the instructions weren't quite clear of what you would say to a confidential human source that was going to attend that event. If one of my CHSs had come to me and said, I'm going to this event, I'm not giving them any direction other than, if you get arrested, don't call me. We'll get notified that you've been arrested. I'm not your get out of jail free card. If you see criminal activity, like any other citizen, observe and report. But I'm not directing you to go out and collect information or anything like that. You have, those things, you can't do those at the direction of the FBI. You're not authorized to do that. It makes you an agent of the government, and it holds that individual accountable. It can risk their exposure, it can risk exposure to the program, because when they get into court, they're going to say, what did you tell this CHS to do? And we have a form that we fill out that documents the admonishments that we provide to these confidential human sources. So I'd like to see that. I didn't see that in the report, the review of the admonishment reports of each of these confidential human sources. That would be something I would be interested in. And the one CHS that went there that seemed to be given some information from the handling agent of, okay, well, if you see this or you see that, note this or you see this, that you're bridging on giving them directions, and that's not a good thing. I'd like to see the admonishments. I'd like to see I think it's still FD 209. I'd like to see a 302, anything that was written that went into that case file. I'd like to see that before I comment on it. But yeah, having the 275 there, I know some responded to the pipe bomb event. Some were there for protection during the 2001, January 20th, 2001 inauguration. I actually was one of hundreds of FBI agents that were there. And those are political events, and people were out, could be out protesting and engaging in their First Amendment rights. And we were there, but I was posted up in, I think I was on the fifth floor of the Washington field office, just kind of looking out the window, watching the things going on. We were there to respond if needed. And we were there. The Secret Service was well aware of who we were and where we were posted. We weren't out surveilling, uh, trying to suppress free speech. We were there in case something broke. We were pre-positioned so that we could respond quickly. So that there's more information that needs to come out about the 275 agents. All right, we're coming into a close here. I have got to cut out because yesterday was my daughter-in-law's Caroline, my middle son Josh's wife. It was her birthday, and we're taking her out to brunch. And then later today, you can see I've got my Alabama gear on. We in the Hinkle family and in the Chris Allen family, we tend to we wear the clothing, and if it's a bad day for the Crimson Tide, we tend not to wear that. So I've got some polo shirts. Some of them I'll have to donate to charity. That if I was wearing that shirt and I'm in the stadium and we lose, I typically won't wear that shirt again. My oldest son Jake is hilarious with it. When we were watching the Florida State game at the beginning of the year and things were going bad, he actually went into the other room and changed clothes. And he's like me. If I'm eating when the game starts, I can continue eating. If I was not eating when the game starts, I can't eat until the game's over with. It's just these I don't know. These things that we practice is something that I think that's just innate to Alabama fans. But I'm looking forward to getting to see my granddaughter here in just a little bit. Jake and Sarah Grace and Sutton Grace, I think, are planning on meeting us over to go to brunch, take Caroline out, celebrate her birthday, and then tonight we're going to get together to watch Sutton Grace get to see her first Alabama game. My son's been preparing her by showing highlight videos and stuff of Alabama. She's got a ton of Alabama gear already. We're going to keep her into that, as they say, raise your children right, raise them as Christians, as Alabama fans. But I do appreciate people taking the time to tune in. This was a last minute thing. We're going to try to get more regimented when we put these out. I just thought it was important to touch on some of these issues. I highly recommend you go out and look up Daniel Rosen of the New York Sun and read his article. He's one of the good guys. So far, he hasn't given me any reason to distrust him. And most of the people in the media I do distrust, even at Fox News. Go look up my friend James Gagliano. Well, it looks like Gagliano. It's Galliano. But go look up Gags online. His articles in the New York Sun. You're going to see him. He's constantly on Fox News lately. I think they're probably going to offer him a contributorship position there. He used to have one years ago with CNN after he retired. He's got a lot of connections in the media. He calls balls and strikes as well. And he was just on Laura Ingram's show, and he just torched Jim Comey. It was an epic takedown. So follow him. Another friend of mine to follow is John Nance. He is a retired FBI agent. He's got some hands-on knowledge with some of these miscreants out there that are trying to say that they're subject matter experts. You can ask John about that. He's at the John Nance on X, and he writes for townhall.com now. Definitely worth the read. He's got a Substack out there. The other, and I had her on the radio with me on Thursday, is Ada Nestor. She's at Ada Nestor WC. That's Westchester, I think, is what the WC stands for. She is one of the hosts on WWDB up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been on their show a number of times, she and Gary Heasley. It's the conservative voice. You can follow her, Ada Nestor, at Ada Nestor WC. Gary typically responds from the conservative voice. Ada is well written and well respected. She has a great Substack article. Donald Trump follows her. He has posted one of her articles before. I highly recommend that you do that as well. There's so many other people I'd love to give a shout out to. We talked about Chris Salcedo. We've talked about many of the people out there in the media. We're a small outfit right now at the Blunt Force Conservative broadcast. We are growing. We do have some connections out there with some very prominent individuals. Look forward to having some of them on the podcast here. Another person you can look out for is Chris Piehota, Piehota. He's a retired executive assistant director, one of the good guys that pushed back from the inside at some of the highest levels. And we will talk again on the Blunt Force Conservative broadcast. Thank you for taking the time to tune in today, and roll tide.